Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Glad you could join us this morning. We're going to get started in just a minute. Before we do, as usual, we always just quickly run through webinar procedures. So I'll make this brief. As always, it's one-way audio from us to you, meaning that you do not need to worry about having a microphone. That certainly doesn't mean you cannot communicate with us. We just ask that you use the Q&A box to send in all your questions and comments throughout the course of this webinar. You'll see that Q&A feature on your screen, top, middle, top, bottom, or maybe bottom left. It depends on your screen resolution and setup. But I just asked for a quick audio test that you find that Q&A box and fire off a Y or a yes. If you can hear me, it's a good signal. Everything's working and sounding good for you. The first page of the PowerPoint presentation should be up on your screens now. And it looks like we're good to go on that. I appreciate the feedback there. And as usual, or always, if anything does come up during the course of the webinar, technology-wise, if you have issues or problems, again, that Q&A box, just toss a note in there. I'll monitor that in the background. We'll try to take care of anything that may come up. It looks like we're good to go, though, and again, I appreciate all the feedback for the confirmation. So without any further ado, I'm going to step aside, and Kefi and the crew will be on, and we'll begin.
Thank you for joining us for the February GATE Equity webinar, where we explore topics related to equity and graduation success. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our webpage in the next couple of weeks. The PowerPoint is available now, and it's posted on OSPI's GATE Equity webinar page. So if you want to follow along, it's available there. Also, we'd like to ask that you direct the questions that you want us to answer into the Q&A and not the chat, so we can more easily monitor and respond to those questions. Chat's a little more for commentary. Today's topic is building the bridge, inclusion and kindergarten transition. In response to a request we got on our evaluations, we're posting pictures of us so that you know who's speaking today. I'm Kathy Anderson, OSPI Graduation Equity Program Supervisor, and I'm joined today by Amber Havens, WAKIDS Assessment Coordinator. And we have Christie Dominguez. She's the Director of Early Childhood Education from Bellingham Public Schools here too. We're lucky to have you guys with us. We appreciate it. Superintendent Reckdahl's K-12 vision has 3 phases, each lasting 2 years, from small improvements to a full redesign of the K-12 education system. Building universal learning access is one of his goals that we want to touch on today. Entering school kindergarten ready is a formative assessment of where students are when they enter our school system and the start of a continuum leading to eventual graduation. Today we're focusing on easing the transition to kindergarten, and we're going to talk about these goals. Our goals are to provide you with some systemic strategies for supporting a smooth transition to kindergarten, taking into account students with disabilities, and we're going to be taking a look at Bellingham School District and what they're doing. Washington's multi-tiered system of support is a prevention-oriented, team-based, and data-driven tiered framework that combines response to intervention and positive behavior interventions and supports. That's PBIS. And it integrates a system-wide continuum of school, family, and community-based learning supports, including things like resources, strategies, structures, and practices into one coherent system. This MTSS calls for empowering families and strengthening community partnerships to create opportunities for all stakeholders to engage in the work of improving academic achievement, social competence, and closing opportunity gaps. Amber's going to tell us more about WAKIDS and why it's important.
Thank you. So WAKIDS is one part of the Full Day K initiative that this year has been fully rolled out across the state, which means that all school districts are now required to participate in full day kindergarten. Part of that is the WAKIDS assessment, and so I say that because a lot of times people think that WAKIDS is full day K, when in actuality it's one leg of full day K. WAKIDS is the assessment portion, and then there's also the early learning collaboration piece and the family collaboration piece. So why WAKIDS? It helps, or why WAKIDS and full day K? It helps create a smooth transition for children and families into kindergarten. It has a framework that allows the teachers and districts to be able to connect with all their partners to make that successful. It meets children where they are developmentally in the first weeks of kindergarten. And it also helps inform instruction and create evolving developmentally appropriate learning environments. It's also a bridge to early learning and K-12 systems. And it's an observation-based, ongoing, embedded classroom activities. It's not just a pull-out model. And what that means is that teachers will be observing children in their classroom and doing their assessments based on the tool and not pulling the children out to do it in a testing fashion. The family connections piece, we just received feedback from our survey that was sent out to districts, teachers, and principals. And what we find is the family connection piece is their favorite, and it seems to be the most successful. Family kindergarten registration oftentimes starts in the spring and follows through the summer and into the start of the school. And kindergarten registration is a great first touch point for districts to connect with families. We also have family brochures on our website that we provide to districts and are easily accessible, and we find that teachers really like to use those when they connect with the families at home visits or during their family conferences at the very beginning of the year. Early learning partnerships is the third leg of that stool that districts are really jumping in and making connections with, and we found in the survey that they're wanting more information around and ideas as to what's been successful and building that capacity. So what we know is happening currently is joint professional development with pre-K teachers in early learning programs across the state with our K-12 system. We hope that there's a common understanding of readiness for children and what classrooms look like for children in both pre-K and in the kindergarten classrooms, and make that bridge so that the transition is more smooth. We also hope that there's collaboration on that transition process for children and families. So if they're pre-K teachers, understand what is happening in the K-12 system and vice versa, then both sides can help children and families transition more smoothly. And then just continued bridging between early learning and K-12 systems. So we here at OSPI do a lot of work with the Department of Early Learning, with our higher ed partners, so that we're making sure that our systems are creating roadmaps that are supportive of all. We know that people are using the WAKIDS data to inform state and regional practice. So we use it to measure access and success to our world-class education. We also know that it's used to focus the development of instructional resources, such as the pathways for literacy and the pathways for math. And we're looking at doing some more work around social and emotional. We know that it provides information to state initiatives, like I said, the social emotional learning modules and other work that's popping up. And then it's informing regional and community programs. So we're making connections with libraries and YMCAs and fitness programs and the like. We get a lot of questions about the objectives and dimensions of learning that we use to show us the widely held expectations. So this is an example of what comes from the Teaching Strategies Gold tool that we use. And our focus is on the blue and the purple bands. So children who are in the blue band are generally in the 4-year-old range. Those are in the purple band are considered to be in the kindergarten range. And like when we do the assessment, we can see where children are entering in each of these areas. The bands that I just showed you actually show widely held expectations, but what we really want to look at is kindergarten readiness, and that is where the red arrow is showing for this specific dimension. But in all of the areas where blue meets purple is what we would consider kindergarten ready. This is an ongoing observational assessment. While we require only that teachers do this in the fall as a kindergarten entry assessment, we're finding that nearly 400 teachers across the state are using it 3 times a year. And they're choosing a subset of areas like social, emotional, they're looking at math, or they're looking at literacy to hone in on within their classrooms. But sometimes they'll also track certain children. If they have concerns in their classroom, they can look at it independently of just the children. But it was really exciting to get some feedback from teachers who use it 2 to 3 times a year. They're saying that it's much easier, they're getting great information, it's informing their practice, they're changing their environments to meet the needs of children, and they're seeing outcomes that they were really excited about. So I'm going to speak for a colleague, Val Arnold, who is unable to join us today. And for further information, her contact information is added to this, so you can reach out to her specifically, but I'll do my best to support her slides here. The Pre-Kindergarten Early Literacy Initiative is, it's serving those transformational zones. It's an action research project that is happening with Puget Sound ESD, the Capital Region ESD, and Northeast Washington ESD. And the goal is to reduce the early literacy achievement gap between entering kindergartners with disabilities and typically developing peers. And the focus domain from our WAKIDS Gold assessment is the literacy domain. And they look at phonological awareness, the knowledge of the alphabet, knowledge of print and its uses, comprehends and responds to books and other texts, and emergent writing skills. Considerations for students eligible for SPED who are coming in and transitioning into kindergarten is another area that we're focusing on. And it's important that we look at timing and thinking about those transitional activities. So our early learning professionals and the schools are looking at discussions about potential transition options, such as classroom visits, doing school tours, and just getting that process moving earlier rather than later. It's also important to clarify roles and responsibilities. We need to work together to safeguard that our families and children we serve from a transitional nightmare and preserve the integrity of the transition process. So together we have to be able to establish and communicate our roles and responsibilities in a transparent and respectful manner that can be easily understood by families. And then the last one is the family norms and child preference. This is something that's important all around, but making sure that we remember that the families are the child's first and most important teacher. And if we can meet children where they are, it's also important to meet families where they are. And we want to individualize that experience for each one and every student to honor their family norms and the child's preference. So establishing strong collaborative relationships with parents early on will result in maximum benefit, the smooth and effective transition. So a few of those examples would be consider the location of meetings, consider family routines, would morning or afternoons work best, and then communication styles. And most importantly, ask the parents for their ideas. And lastly, tools and resources. And these are some that are available. Working together, a parent's guide to parent and professional partnerships and communication within special education. High leverage practices in special education, and then the Harvard Family Research Project, Ready for Success.
All right, we're going to take a moment to have a poll. So our polling questions are here somewhere. And while we do that, we're going to have Amber answer some questions. So there was a question about how are districts using SEL data from WAKIDS? Do you know a little more about that?
Right now, I know that they're using it to create communities of practice in some of our district and talking about ways to support early learning providers around the same topic for that transition. I know that they're also creating environments. I was just talking to a district a couple days ago about how they're creating their environment to really support those emotional needs of kids. So having more private spaces where if they just need to get away, they have that space. We're looking at more professional development opportunities in PD. And it's definitely one that's on our radar to get more resources for.
Awesome. Also, are the brochures in different languages?
Yes, they are. They're actually on the WAKIDS website at OSPI, and they come in 19 different languages, and you're able to print them right off of there.
Nice. And we had another comment. I have seen WAKIDS administered in a pull-out testing fashion in many locations. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, that we hear that happens, and my goal is to just get that communication out there about why we want it to be an observation-based assessment and how we get better results, especially from kindergartners around this. Play-based environments and activities give us a better platform for doing those observations, and we realize there's some work to be done around that and some communication that still needs to be happening. So we've created a newsletter that has been coming out since February, and that's on our website as well. That's getting information around how important it is to do it, and ways and skills and steps that make it easier for teachers. But it's definitely a paradigm shift for a lot of teachers.
Yeah, very different.
Mm-hmm.
See, another question. Would it be appropriate to do some WAKIDS testing during a kindergarten registration event?
Yeah, that's funny. I just got that question this morning. The tool itself is not a screener. And so really what we want to see is children in the environment, in their classroom environment. We do it over 8 weeks because children sometimes need to get comfortable and feel secure in their space. There are certainly some that you can see if they're already writing their name. That's going to be one that you could document. But for the most part, it's not a screener. And we give you the full 8 weeks to be able to gather that information in a play-based natural setting.
And for some reason, our polling isn't working, but the majority of people who did answer the question did say yes, or I'm not sure. So I didn't see a single no on people who said something in the chat.
Great.
Let's see, one more question. As a parent resource coordinator, I've spoken with many families who are transitioned from special education preschool to full special education kindergarten structured learning environments without any knowledge or conversation about inclusion or least restrictive environment. Is WAKIDS addressing this in its transition work with families?
Yes, and it's a very, I don't want to say that it's a new step, but we have started to do some really specific work. And Val Arnold actually has been doing some meetings with us, and she is, I don't know if it's officially part of our group, but she is now the early learning connection with this special education department and us. So we've linked up in the past month and a half very tightly to start sharing some of that and work on it.
Okay.
Good morning. This is Christie Dominguez, and I am from Bellingham, Washington, where we've been engaged in using WAKIDS since 2011. Our district has about 11,000 students. We have 14 elementary schools, and currently I have 42 kindergarten programs using WAKIDS, specifically teaching strategies gold at this time of the year. But I also have 13 preschool sections, mostly developmental preschool, a couple title, who are also using TSG to inform instruction. So you can go ahead and. So just a little bit about our journey, and actually this journey started with when I was a full-day kindergarten teacher. I was in a tuition-based preschool or kindergarten classroom when an email came across my desk asking if I would be willing to pilot WAKIDS, not knowing what it was, but knowing that I was going to get paid some money to do it. I said, sure, I'll do it. I had 30 students that year and myself, no instructional assistant in the classroom. And actually that year I didn't even have a parent volunteer sign up. And I implemented WAKIDS and specifically used gold as a tool in my classroom. And I have to say it was a very humbling experience. And it was humbling in the fact that I had been an early childhood practitioner for about 18 years at that time. And it was the first time that I was really looking at my students from an appropriate developmental lens. And so after I kind of got over that initial learning phase, after the first checkpoint, my colleague and I, who was in another building also piloting, said, let's do this again. So we implemented the tool again in winter, and then we did full class in spring. And that's what really began the conversation here in Bellingham. We began sharing that data not only with our families, but with our colleagues across the district, talking about this incredible tool that was really taking into account the development of the child. And we found that it was the most meaningful data that we had experienced as early learning practitioners to date. So the following year, 9 additional schools came on board and added gold to their toolbox and fully implemented WAKIDS. And then the following year, all elementary schools came on board. And currently, we are in full implementation, and the data really drives our practice here. Go ahead. So people ask all the time, how do you build the system? And I think we were really fortunate in the fact that it really started at the classroom level, and with a very slow rollout, we were able to build up. And so, but it didn't come, you know, just easy. We had to be very thoughtful about it, and we really had to think differently about how we were doing business in Bellingham. So many of your K-12 educators have had some type of assessment class, but not necessarily observational assessment. I had had an early childhood degree, some of my colleagues did, and those of us who were in early learning programs had had observational assessment as part of our foundation. So we had to really do some training. What did it mean to observe? Most my colleagues had kind of that set in the pullout that was mentioned earlier had been their training system. And so that idea of trusting children and watching them and feeling competent about that, what they were seeing was difficult at first, and it didn't come without some growing pains. But over time, we've developed a system of approach, and we really leaned on 2 different groups in our system who understood observational assessment. We leaned on our community partners who had early learning backgrounds. They became our coaches. And we also leaned on our physical education teachers, who that was a practice in their day-to-day classrooms and gyms. They were fluent in observational assessment, so they provided some professional development as well. The other piece we had to really think about were the classrooms that we had set up. Did we set students up for success? Were we running developmentally appropriate classrooms, and were we engaging in developmentally appropriate practices? For example, were we giving children opportunities in open-ended activities? That might look like a blank piece of paper with crayons versus a coloring sheet. Coloring sheet we would consider a closed activity. There's kind of one way, the lines are already set, whereas a blank piece of paper allows a child to explore and expand and go further with it. So we really began to have those kind of conversations. Also, within the 3-year timeline, I moved out of the classroom and I moved over to the district office. And so we ended up having someone as a point person, being myself at the time, who was the lead on this assessment and really helping look at it, not only with teachers, but principals as well. And we did that side-by-side coaching. So I would go in and sit side-by-side. I also contracted with Head Start teachers in our community who came in and served as coaches in my classrooms. They had been using GOLD by Teaching Strategies for a few years, so they were fluent with the tool, and they were able to provide some additional leveled support. I think another piece, and this is one that when I talk to districts about, this can't just be up to school teachers. It can't be just on the backs of the kindergarten teachers in your school. Your administrators have to know and understand this tool. Otherwise, the data ends up being just used at the classroom level, and it needs to be used not only horizontally, but also vertically throughout your system. In Bellingham, we now use it when we have student growth collaborations. We use it for our transition meetings going in from pre-K to K, as well as from K to 1. And because of that, we have a ton of interest, and at some point, we're hoping we'll be able to move this tool up and use it in our first grade classrooms as well. So backing up, when I said that we had to do some reshifting, we had to really think differently about the structure of how we were looking at our classrooms. And so here's a graphic that has become a bit of a staple in our system. And it really shows that this work has to begin with the child. So when I think of any kindergarten classroom, and the data shows this, you have children who enter your kindergarten programs functioning in a developmental area anywhere from around 1 year of age, birth, all the way up through 3rd grade. I'd like to use the analogy of a baby. So a brand new baby's born, and we can kind of talk about what are the ages and stages they're going to go through to learn to walk. So, right, like first the baby's going to lay there for some time, and then we're going to provide that baby some tummy time, and then they're going to start to push up. Eventually, they'll push up on all fours and do some rocking. Then they learn to crawl. They're going to crawl over to furniture after a while and begin pulling themselves up. Adults are going to help scaffold and hold their fingers, and they're going to begin taking those initial steps. And then over time, that child's going to be able to walk independently on their own. When you think about a kindergarten classroom, we have children who are in that beginning stage, either in reading or language, writing, math, social, emotional, cognitive, coming into our classrooms all the time. They're really at that beginning stage of laying there or tummy time or crawling, but yet because they're now in kindergarten, we expect them to move to that walking phase instantly. Not all children work that way. Child development happens over time, and that's the beauty of this tool. So we really have to know who our students are, where they're beginning, and we have to know what are the developmental stages for all the domains for each and every child, knowing that they're all going to come to things at different times. I think of my own 3 children, very similar experiences, same parents. And my oldest started walking at 9 months. My middle daughter started walking at 6 months. And then my son started walking on his first birthday. They all got to the same outcome, but they all did it within their own time and when they were developmentally ready. So we have to know that, and not just your teachers, but building principals. We need to communicate that with families and your systems level as a whole. Then you need to look at your environment. Where in that environment do all children fit? Is the environment set up so that it meets the developmental needs of all your students? So we're not overshooting for some or undershooting for others. So what are those, you know, like an example of a library? You're going to have board books in the library as well as chapter books in the library. You're going to have children who are going to need those board books for fine motor. It's very difficult to turn the pages, but then you're going to have children coming into your classrooms reading and ready for a more sophisticated challenge of text. And we move into adult-child interactions. What does that sound like in your class? Who's actually leading the learning? A great example of a teacher practice that I love to hear is when the child comes up and says, "Can I get a drink of water?" And the teacher engages back, "I don't know, can you?" Really putting the ownership of decision-making onto the child, coaching into their ear to problem solve, and making sure that you are initiating those conversations that raise the bar for every child. Finally, once we know all of those things, then we can begin to assess, plan, and teach. So what does our assessment show us about the strengths of this child and the areas that this child needs to grow? Every child has something that they need to develop in, and every child has an area of strength. And that's the beauty of this tool. It's not just looking at a child through the lens of reading, writing, or math, but it truly does look at the whole child. One of my favorite examples was I got a call from a kindergarten teacher one time, and she said that one of her students had jumped 2 feet from the floor on top of a desk and then hopped from the desk to the radiator in the classroom. So she goes, "You know what I know about this child is his gross motor is incredible, but his executive function could use some work." That's what this tool can actually do. It really does help you look at the child through a strengths-based assessment. And then finally, and I think this is the mistake sometimes we make, finally you look at the curriculum and you say, based on all of these pieces that I know and understand about this child, where in the curriculum do I need to begin? In Bellingham 2 years ago, we adopted a new math curriculum, and it started with kindergarten, but yet our data showed that 80% of our students were not coming in with the K-ready skills in mathematics. If we would have started that curriculum on day one, then we left 80% of our students behind. We had to really know what were those pre-math concepts that those children needed so we could close that opportunity gap and not essentially create an achievement gap. So when I talked about the environments needing to transition with child development, here's a graphic I like to use. In Bellingham, we actually have child care centers at all 3 of our high schools. And so when I look at environments, I am truly looking at infant, toddler, preschool, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade environments, truly looking at that entire curriculum. And I have to ask myself, what are the appropriate materials for those ages and stages? But this also shows the age span. So this graphic shows anywhere from infancy to about 2nd grade. You can see that those tools, I have those ages and stages in every kindergarten classroom. But am I thinking about my different areas in my classroom in this way? Am I providing soft blocks or larger blocks for my children with low fine motor development? And am I putting out wood blocks on day one without knowing if all of my children can safely play with those? So I have to really know and think about the ages and stages of my students before I'm planning my instruction. I think oftentimes we think that learning or that instruction happens the first day of school. And actually in Bellingham, we begin having these conversations in August when teachers are setting up their classrooms. I set the classroom up like a racetrack, children are going to use it like a racetrack. I need to be mindful of the areas. I need to be mindful of the types of learning that I expect to see in those areas. And like Amber said earlier, this should be a play-based learning. Research is very clear that children learn through play. That is the work of the child. And when people question me about why do you have kitchens or blocks in your kindergarten, first grade, or preschool classrooms, well, the same could be asked, why do we have robotics and CTE programs thriving in our high schools? Because really, isn't that play-based learning at a developmentally appropriate level for those age and stage of learners? So being mindful of what are the tools our children need in order to do the work that is so important in their brain development. So WAKIDS in Bellingham, what are those big ideas? Well, we've seen lots of benefits. In fact, I was just talking to a teacher last night about assessment, and she did not even mention gold. It's just kind of a way we do business now. What we do find as the benefits is it really does help us understand those entering kindergartners, and it gives us common language to use. And not only amongst our K community, but with our first grade teachers, but also our preschool partners. Many of our preschool community is using Gold by Teaching strategies, not just in our own preschool, but those who are involved in early achievers are using the tool in their environments. And so we have a common overlay of how we're looking at children. It also measures growth over time. So our teachers use it for their TPEP goals. It helps them measure individual students, but also groups of students over time. And we don't just use it at the classroom level. We're using it at the systems level, building level as well. So a great example was I had a building about 4 years ago, and when their data came in, because we use it fall, winter, and spring. So when their winter data came in, it was obvious that their students were not making the gains that we had hoped in social emotional. And their class sizes were a little larger than the rest of the district. So I was able to build a case based on that data hire. So there were 3 kindergarten classrooms. I hired a 4th teacher who went in and really became a social emotional kindergarten coach. So he did side-by-side coaching in classrooms, and then he began to, someone said my mic is in and out, so I'm just double checking. So then he began to pull small groups, and then finally he got to one-on-one coaching with some students. So he was able to really build that system, and that cohort of students still has some of the highest social emotional data in that elementary school. Another piece is everyone's eyes are on the data. Our psychologists are looking at the data, our OTs, our PTs, our SLPs, our superintendents, our DACs, building principals. Everyone is aware what the data has to say. Our lab teachers, title teachers, math intervention specialists, our highly capable director. Everyone is looking at this to say, what are these students showing us? What are their strengths and what are their next steps? And finally, like I mentioned, this is required in Bellingham, and that was a teacher choice. A couple years ago when they were working on their contract, they said they wanted it in their contract that they would give this tool fall, winter, and spring because they're finding it so valuable. And it's changing the way we're able to make decisions around support and interventions in our kindergarten classrooms. We do provide 3 release days, though. People always ask about that. So they can use them how they want. They can use them all for one checkpoint period, or they can spread them out over the year. Professionals, I trust that they're going to use them the way that best suits them. They may hire another teacher to come in the classroom that day. We do not have instructional assistants in our kindergarten classrooms, and so sometimes that's beneficial. They may use it to analyze data. They may use it to upload data, but they do get 3 release days over the course of the year.
All right, and we do have a question from the audience from Catherine.
Okay.
I'm wondering, for the teachers, do they get, where does their training for WAKIDS come in? Is that part of their teacher preparation program, or is that on the ground professional?
So, yeah, so, and Amber can talk probably to the state training. So they do go to the initial state training, but then so when I was talking about having a point person in the district, then that comes to me. So I go in and do side-by-side coaching of all our new teachers, and that's part of their mentoring that.
And I can speak to the state training. Every kindergarten teacher that is hired has to attend a training to help them with the tool, teach them how to use it, the expectations, give them practice with the tool, and to help them pass the inter-rater reliability that is required. Well, it's supported. So there is some training available that way. The ESDs also provide professional development throughout the year, ongoing. And then districts, like Kristie is saying, it's kind of district led as to how much PD and how it looks. And that's an area for myself that I'm really interested in getting more resources available, since we will just be training new teachers from now on, since the full rollout has happened.
And a follow-up question to that, what advice and recommendations would you give to school districts that can't fund or hire an SEL coach, psychologists, counselors, teachers, etc., on how to implement this really valuable support system to teachers?
Do you want to speak to that first, Kristie, or?
Why don't you start and then I'll go.
Okay, so first off, I want to offer myself. I'm the coordinator, and one of my favorite things is to work directly with teachers and districts to help build resources and provide them with what we have so far, but also, build new ones. And I'm actually going around the state. I'll be in Bellingham at the end of the month to meet with teachers and gather ideas and talk about ways to overcome barriers and help with systems. So I would like to offer myself as that support. And then we have coordinator calls for districts that if there is somebody within the district that would like to join us, just let me know and I will add you to that. And it's an information sharing place where we can share our great ideas as you guys are doing them in the field.
And then I would just add, it's much like our journey started here in Bellingham. It was just, there were 3 of us piloting it, and then we began inviting colleagues. So, wherever your district is a start, and it's more about understanding the tool. And once you understand it, it really does grow fast, the interest in it. And people's willingness to sit down at the table and look at the data, because we don't have anything like it in our systems. And so it truly does begin to unpack what might be going on for a child, and that's really hard to argue with. Okay.
Okay. We have a follow-up from Phyllis about the big ideas required for fall, winter, and spring assessment. Do you retain spring data so that you can look back from fall data to observe maybe summer learning loss or slide from the students?
I can speak to that from a state perspective, and that is a definite yes. So every June, at the end of June, we pull all the data from the system and we house it here at OSPI. And we encourage the districts to pull their own reports from the system so that you have it. We also have the ability to gather information from the ECAP children in the DEL license that they use. And there's a tool in this system that all you have to do is make a child record request and DEL magically pushes a button. And if they were in ECAP last year, you will see their data from there. And our hope is to use that information to bridge that summer and evaluate what's happening in the summer and look at the possibly difference in scores and do some work around that. And as Kristie had mentioned, there is the ability for the first grade tool to be used. And so that's another area we're looking at building a pilot around soon.
Mm-hmm. And does that include that span between 2nd or 3rd grade? Are you looking to expand there?
We would love to expand it. Those of us who have used this tool, and you can hear it in Kristie's voice, it is one of the best tools I have ever seen and used personally. And I get so excited about it that yes, I would love everybody to use it, but it's quite a big process. And so we take it one step at a time. It's available, but the system here at OSPI, we're working on one step at a time.
And Kristie, what resources did you use when creating your observational assessment professional development for teachers?
Oh, it was really just more of a coaching model. Every teacher has kind of their own flair on how they're organizing and collecting their data. We don't have a one size fits all. So being able to go in, I think, it's hard. I keep trying to think back to what it was like when I was first learning the tool. Now I can go in, and I have a slide here soon to show, and I can tell you, the 5 objectives I was able to just in one moment of observing a child. And so some of my teachers have recording tools, some of them have binders, some of them use primarily just photos with captions. But so it's more helping them find the strategy that works for them and being able to coach into it.
We did get another question over here. It says from Starla, we use TS Gold in our district preschool program through Dell Collaborative, and the K teachers use it through OSPI, but those databases cannot share information for KE teacher to for KE teacher, cannot see all the valuable data our preschool teachers have entered. Any ideas on how to bridge this dilemma?
Hi Starla. We were actually working last week with teaching strategies, as this is a huge request of ours. There are two separate licenses. So the Department of Early Learning has theirs, and OSPI has ours. And these two do not talk, with the exception of these ECAP children. And when the ECAP children were registered, it was with an agreement that the data would be shared with OSPI. That opens up a huge bale of lawyers and confidentiality issues that is way bigger than our scope is for right now, but we keep bringing it up, hoping that there's a way that we can share this information, but it's confidential student data, and families are very, rightly so, protective of it, but the longitudinal studies we could have is just fascinating for me. So we keep asking about ways that we can do that. The option is that if you are an early learning provider that is using your own private license or the DEL license of teaching strategies, we would love it if you would print off the reports for those individual children and give them to the families. And then the families can then bring them to their kindergarten registration. And at that point, we would have that information for the teachers. And honestly, that's where it's most important. So that's the workaround so far.
I think we're going to move on in the interest of time.
Okay, so some of the themes that we have found in our work over time is just that increased common language and practices. So I talked earlier about the environments. It's not just within our own system that we see commonalities with our environments. I can go to my Head Start partners. I can go to the YMCA Downtown Health Care Center. I can go to the co-ops across town, and we all have similarities in our environment. And part of what this tool did was it brought us to the table having conversation about what did we know about high quality early learning environments that promoted play as an instructional strategy. And so I'm trying to work on my mic. I do not know what's going on. I apologize for that. And so what we have found is that no matter where you're at in an early learning program here in our community, you're going to see commonalities, which not only benefits collecting data, but it benefits our children and our families' understanding of what does that continuum look like. We also think of TSG as a container. I'm asked a lot about the different assessments. You give so many assessments in a school district, and this isn't working with that, and we're over-assessing. But we in Bellingham think of it as a container. Everything we do should feed in as direct evidence to TSG. So when we first began this journey, we looked at all the assessments we were getting in kindergarten, and we asked ourselves, does this directly align with what GOLD is asking us to gather? And if it didn't, we got rid of it. And part of why we felt comfortable about that is what we know about GOLD is it's a continuum based on child development. And that's where we should be focusing on in early childhood. So if we had an assessment that did not feed into GOLD, then we had to ask ourselves, where are we giving children an assessment that was developmentally appropriate for their age stage? And we really didn't, we're not able to answer that, so we were able to eliminate that. So now everything we do feeds into GOLD. And so we think of it as a funnel where we pour everything in, and then it pulls out the information in a quantitative fashion. We also have been able to make, based on our data, a very targeted focus around social, emotional, and math. We continually see that as an area of need. It's the conversation that we should have with our preschool practitioners. This year, we're actually running instructional rounds with community partners and our kindergarten teachers, where we have two of our early learning specialists who are bringing those two groups together, and they're going in and doing observations in one another's classrooms and having conversations around the targets of this tool, and then how are we supporting both social, emotional, and math, and then additional literacy. Another piece is we're able to intervene at a child's developmental level. Years ago when I used to teach kindergarten, the one specialist we had commonly in our class or in our schools were the title teachers. And so basically the children who were falling behind tended to get additional help with a title instructor, which really focused around literacy. And it reminded me of a few years ago, I went in and I was asked to observe a little guy who was having a really hard time learning to read. And so I did this observation of him, and the whole time he was sitting there, he was sitting in a chair, and he really could not attend to the book. But what I was able to do was really watch as he wiggled around in this chair. And I said, here, friend, can you come lay down at circle, on your tummy with this book? So he was laying flat at circle, and I put the book in front of him. Well, what'd you know? He knew how to read the whole book. What he didn't know how to do was sit in a chair. So we were using the wrong intervention for what this child actually needed. So we began to work with him on some core development, and it had nothing to do with him being able to read or not. And so we were able to really target in on what this child needed. Like I said, we were able to do really focused support. Our developmental preschool teachers specifically use this data to help write their IEPs that then are feeding into kindergarten, which has built a nice bridge with our resource room teachers who are also looking at the data and in conjunction writing those IEP goals with the K teacher. For evaluations, anytime a child is brought to the table, the data is at the table with us. Our ELL team, our title team, I would add our math intervention specialist, everyone is looking at the same data to make decisions based on what are the next steps for this child. And it's a formative assessment. You don't have to wait. One of my favorite conversations with a K teacher was that she had observed a child playing alone in the fall, and then in the winter she got the same data and she was like, oh, that's right, I was supposed to do something about that. You can do something right in the moment after you've made the observation. You don't have to wait. You can see a picture here. This is the one I was talking about. This was taken a couple years ago where I was doing an observation on a little girl and she was playing in the home area. And during that time, these 4 children, I was able to gather data on all these objectives. And I think I was in there watching for maybe 10 minutes. And I had a lot of rich information just about these children in that time that I was able to shoot off to the kindergarten teacher. It doesn't take a lot of time because everything in a kindergarten day feeds into the school. You can go ahead and forward. So some key strategies. Just last week, we had a district-wide MTSS meeting where we have MTSS teams from every elementary school come together about once a month wide, and they were actually looking at our fall data. You can see that there in the big picture. And they were able to look not only at our district data, but actually at their school and begin to make sense of what was happening. And then from that big picture, we began to look at a diagnostic. And on the right-hand side, you can see a picture. This is our team of ELL teachers actually had a child come to the table of conversation where they were concerned that this child was not making growth. So they looked at understand social cues of English. And they gathered data from all these different children who were most like this child across our district. And they were able to say, is this child making growth compared to other children like him across our system? Should we be worried? Should we be intervening? What should we do? And so many of our groups are going deeper with the data and asking themselves, what's really going on here for this child? So it's not asking, for the teacher, what does this mean for me and my students? But we're also, how are we supposed to be responding as a system? Go ahead. And so when I think about what advice would I give and I think about our journey, it starts with that coordination. Who in your system is going to own this information? Because the number one piece I get from teachers as I travel across the state is, why are we doing this? Who is this for? Outside my classroom, who cares about this data? We should all care about this data. Who is helping make sense of it in your area? And also looking at that alignment of assessments. I think sometimes we think more is better. This is the best we've got. I cannot imagine a better tool. And so asking yourself, these things that I'm asking teachers to collect, is it feeding in as evidence to gold? And if it's not, then why are we doing it? Is it benefiting the students we serve? And really, everyone needs to be at the table. Having your psychologists, your OTs, your PTs, your preschool teachers, principals, superintendents, directors, classroom teachers, paraeducators, even on the playground. If I have a child who's struggling with gross motor development, the folks who are out monitoring our recess know about that data because they're going to make sure that child is not just sitting off to the side. They're going to coach them into getting involved with a ball or just swinging on the monkey bars. So making sure everyone, even in the cafeteria, if you have a child who's struggling with fine motor development, that child's going to be frustrated every day trying to open their mouth. So how are we coaching that child in that moment? Every moment is a teachable moment for a young child. And I think the biggest advice I would give is use the data over time. If you're just giving it in the fall, then you're losing a lot of rich opportunities to close that gap for children. This is a very critical year. We have a lot of power in that kindergarten year. And so making sure that we're using every opportunity to do all we can for that child.
All right, so we're going to take a moment to reflect on what we've heard today. So after hearing all this great information, what's one major takeaway that you have from Bellingham? And if you want to share that in the chat, it's great for us to be able to share our learning together. We like that. And while that's going on, we did have some comments from people. So from Alme, like in other grades, especially in the elementary, Puyallup uses SEL data to design building-wide multi-tiered support using the foundation of PBIS. So it looks like Puyallup is also a great resource if you want to talk about that social emotional learning. And Catherine said that Kaplan Early Learning Company has some great professional development available around observational assessments and coaching. So that's another great resource out there. And another question from Nikki, do you have suggestions for kindergarten screeners?
Not off the top of my head, Nikki, but I can get those out. Like I said, I got that question this morning about the screeners. So I'm going to be trying to gather some information, but they tend to be pretty specific. So I will see what I can get back out to everyone.
And I think we're out of questions unless you guys have some more. So we're gonna move on. We do have a survey, which I put into the chat box for you. So it's an evaluation to tell us how we're doing and what you think about our webinar and if there's ways we can improve or things that you like. We always love to get that feedback from you. So if you could take a minute and please fill out our evaluation, we appreciate that. We are getting a couple of more questions. So from Phyllis, appreciate the commitment to assessments 3 times a year, but look forward to learning about growth and using the tool to detect adult planned summer learning loss. Catherine Hobbs says, to the point about DAL, now Washington State Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and OSPI, plus many other groups in the state, how do you see them all coming together for kids? What a great question.
Yeah. So, well, I know that we do have lots of connecting meetings. That's such a big question to ask, but it definitely is on all of our plates and wonderings and trying to make the system as seamless as we can. So I can't really answer that off the top of my head, but I know that it is in the work and we do meet regularly with one another.
And another question from Jennifer, is this the only assessment that Bellingham uses in kindergarten?
No, it's not. Everything we do really serves as an assessment. But I would say the formal assessments, we do have a kindergarten screener that we give fall, winter, and spring. Well, actually, we give it before kids enter kindergarten, during the fall, winter, and spring. And then we give the benchmark assessment system And then, you know, we have some different, you know, little math tools we use, writing samples we gather about once a month. So, but again, all of that feeds directly into this tool. So it's where we gather the information, really.
Awesome. And we are running out of time. So next month, we're going to be talking about inspiring civic engagement. And that's going to be March 14th from 10 to 11. So we hope you can join us for that. We also have some upcoming events. You can join us for Gate Advisory. We'll have the authors of Why We Drop Out talking about interviews with dropouts that they conducted and their recommendations for keeping students engaged. There will also be a panel of students there to talk about their experiences in our K-12 system. So that's a pretty exciting thing coming up to meet those authors. Coming up, there are also several trainings for mental health in the high school, teacher training. Although it's not geared to elementary, it might be interesting to recommend to a friend or share with people in your district. I really can't recommend it enough. So if you're tackling school culture, it is a really great resource. And Project Aware brings this teacher training to you for free. This curriculum improves mental health literacy. It's widely taught in schools across Canada and internationally. And the material is medically accurate and designed for classroom settings. It prepares classroom teachers in the use of the curriculum in their classroom, and it provides a basic overview of mental health and illness and an orientation with those teaching materials. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And we're going to stay on for a few minutes and answer questions for people who have time. Thanks again for joining us for Gate Equity webinar.